Politico chief international affairs columnist Susan Glasser is in Washington. Welcome, Susan.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Susan, the White House has said that it's working on a peace plan for Israel and the Palestinians, but Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas warned this move will ruin the peace process. You recently spoke with the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. What did he say about potential peace talks?
Well, look, I mean, officially the policy of the Israeli government, as it has been of the U.S. government for many years, is to support a two-state solution. But in reality, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his ambassador here in the United States, Ron Dermer, are not big advocates of doing anything major when it comes to the peace process right now. So they've been working very closely with the Trump White House. As you can see from today's move on Jerusalem, they're very closely allied with it. But, in the end, I don't think you're seeing a lot of pressure from Netanyahu to get right to the table, and they're overjoyed today about the Jerusalem decision. Ron Dermer said to me, it's about time that President Trump got rid of this farce of the United States and others not recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And so, what other people are wondering is whether this is going to blow up the peace talks even before they've begun.
At the same time, Susan, does the Trump administration's announcement necessarily signal that we'll learn details about its plans for peace sometime soon?
Not quite the opposite, I would say. If anything, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has been given this very ambitious portfolio by his father-in-law to somehow get ready for the quote-unquote ultimate deal, which is what Donald Trump has promised. Kushner, by all accounts, has kept his nose down, has worked very hard to gain the confidence of leaders around the region, not just in Israel and among the Palestinians, but in particular, he's worked the Saudi channel, and he's tried to encourage what looks to be a kind of brewing enemy of my enemy is my friend alliance between Israel and the other Arabs. So the question is really, does this Jerusalem decision, does it blow up that budding alliance between the Israelis and the Gulf Arabs before it can really produce anything tangible? Or are we going to see a kind of a predictable set of outrage and protests over the next few days, but doesn't mean anything? That's what is the spin coming out of the Netanyahu government today. It's the spin coming out of the Trump White House today. But, we just don't know yet how serious the violence or the protests associated with this move are going to be.
So then the bottom line, Susan, given sort of what you've just spelled out there, the efforts on the part of Jared Kushner, also the president's decision and how it's being received, does it seem like a two-state solution is really the goal for the United States and for Israel?
Well, look, today, on the one hand, was the very first time Donald Trump has ever appeared to use the language of the two-state solution. However, the rest of that sentence was a pretty major caveat. He said, I'm in favor of a two-state solution as long as that is what both of the parties agree to in the end. So basically, it's almost arguably a meaningless thing. And actually, I just ran into Ambassador Dermer, whom I interviewed and who telegraphed to me that this decision really was happening last Friday. Well, I just ran into him before I came over here to do this interview today, and he was making a point of the way that President Trump worded that statement. They're nervous. They're close allies, Netanyahu and Trump, obviously, but they're nervous because they know that Trump is like this. If he punches the Palestinians on the one hand, he may be more receptive to offering some kind of concession on the other. That's kind of his MO. And I think they're a little bit nervous. They don't want Trump to now be trading away too much with the Arabs after alienating them on this Jerusalem decision.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch the president clearly sticking to the script when it came to the remarks. Meantime, Susan, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was in Brussels for NATO meetings on Wednesday. He called President Trump's decision a bold move. So far, no other country besides Israel has supported Mr. Trump's declaration. Do you think there's a chance that'll change?
Look, I think it is one more reminder that the United States under President Trump has been much more isolated on the world stage and alienated from many of our most traditional and strongest allies than we have in the last few years under President Obama. President Trump has chosen a go it alone, an America first diplomacy, and this is kind of a reminder of it. By the way, sources have also said that Rex Tillerson and Jim Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, were opposed internally to President Trump's decision decision. Once again, you have the so-called axis of adults inside the Trump White House opposing a risky move by the president. And I think that it underscores the gaps between President Trump and the national security team he himself has hired. On almost every policy issue, the president's instincts have clashed with those of the much more establishment and experienced national security team he's brought on. They've won a few victories with him, such as convincing him to remain in Afghanistan, which took months of lobbying inside the administration. But time and time again, also, Trump has shown that he's willing to go against the desires of senior people like Madison Tillerson. And that suggests that it's a very internally divided administration when it comes to foreign policy.
Right, a lot to watch. Susan Glasser in Washington for us. Susan, always great to have your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.